Hello, I'm Kate Freeman, and this is the Daily Dollop. On this episode of the Daily Dollop, I'm going to be talking about how to eat well on a tight financial budget. I'm going to highlight some cheap, nutritious foods that you can build your daily eating habits out of, and also some key steps for reducing your weekly food bill. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the show today. This is the Daily Dollop. My name's Kate Freeman. I'm a registered nutritionist and the founder of the Healthy Eating Hub. And fun fact about me is that I super duper hate vomit. Like, really hate vomit. It's literally the worst thing that can happen in a day is someone vomiting, particularly your kids. And I hate vomit so much that I've always been really particular with my kids when they're sick. I'm like, if you need to vomit, you vomit in the toilet. And if you don't vomit in the toilet, you vomit on the ground, you vomit in your bed, you vomit on the carpet, you are out of the family. And I mean, I'm just joking, but I do mean it a bit. Anyway, my kids are rarely sick, thank goodness. And my son, who's vomited only twice in his life, this year earlier on at my mum's house, I think he was just slightly exhausted, a little bit of heat stroke because he'd been outside all day. He'd had a really big day. He just did this massive vomit in the hallway of my mum's house, and he was trying to get to the toilet, but he didn't make it. And it's just like on the walls, everywhere. And I took one look at it and I was like, babe, to my husband, I'm like, you need to come and help me. Anyway, and Carter's standing there and he's like, I'm sorry, Mum. And I looked at him and I was like, Carter, you're out of the family. Anyway, I was just joking, but I actually made him cry, poor kid, and because he genuinely thought he wasn't. I'm not super proud of that parenting moment, but just don't like vomit. Vomit in the toilet, people. It's not that difficult. Suffice to say, my kids are a little bit paranoid about not vomiting in the toilet, poor things. Anyway, on to today's show where we're chatting about healthy eating but being on a tight budget. And, you know, it's a funny thing to think about, but one of the biggest barriers to healthy eating in Australia is the perceived high cost of healthy food. And so a number of years ago, they redeveloped the Australian Dietary Guidelines, which are our government-funded healthy eating guidelines. And they're actually really well done. We set the gold standard in the world for our guidelines. There's 50,000 peer-reviewed articles that go into creating them. As part of that research, they highlighted the key barriers to healthy eating in Australia, and they sort of summarised 3 key barriers. One was a lack of skill in the kitchen, so people didn't have the skills to cook and prep healthy food. Another was time, so people felt they were too busy and time poor to eat well. And then the third one was the perceived high cost of healthy food, so people feeling like they couldn't afford to eat well. And you know what? It's no wonder that many people feel that. I think the financial pressures that we face today are extraordinarily high. There's a lot of pressure on us to have the house, the car, everything. And, you know, money can only go so far, and food is just one part of our living expenses. But on the flip side, the wellness industry just makes out healthy eating to be this thing that's only for the wealthy, elite, beautiful people, and that, you know, it's not accessible for people on small incomes or who can't afford all the fancy superfoods or expensive ingredients or superfood powders. And it's actually sort of created this divide between like us and them as like the elitist, wellness, beautiful people, and then the rest of us Australians who are just like trying to do life as best we can. And there's a nutritionist that I follow and really love. She's got a podcast called 99% Fat Free. Her name's Tara, and her social profiles are The Nutrition Guru and The Chef. And she did a podcast episode a few months ago on the wellness industry and just highlighted the fact that there's this privilege that goes along with the wellness industry, that it's only for privileged people that have high incomes, who have the luxury of staying home to have a mental health day, when a lot of people on low income couldn't just take a mental health day of their job. They'd lose their job. You know, they have to keep working to keep earning income for their families, and they're supporting heaps of people. And it just really, it really resonated with me. And I thought, you know, that's really sad that it's often, you know, when we look at socioeconomic research, that people in the lower socioeconomic backgrounds and brackets of our community who have lower incomes, who might come from disadvantaged backgrounds, they're often the people that could benefit the most from making changes to their diet. Yet the way that we portray healthy eating in social media and culturally makes it like this thing that's unattainable and only for people who can afford it. And it's really sad that there's this us and them that can come out of the wellness industry and the way we've portrayed healthy eating. And I've always wanted to make healthy eating accessible for everyone. And so part of that process in going, okay, if we want to think about healthy eating on a budget, then we need to break the mindset that there are special foods or drinks or powders or supplements that you need to be healthy. It's simply not true. Good health isn't about individual foods. It's not even about individual nutrients. And it's certainly not about supplements or powders or anything like that. You don't need any of those things. And so in order to really break down the fact that healthy eating can be applicable on a tight budget, is that we need to think about healthy eating as being a dietary pattern that's got a wide variety of foods from all of the food groups being eaten regularly as part of a daily pattern. And that these nutrition principles of eating veggies and eating minimally processed foods and eating a wide variety of foods can actually occur on a budget. 100% it can. And so remembering that it's the accumulation of your dietary pattern, not your individual foods, is really vital for this. And so if you are, you know, on a single family income, or you've lost your job this year with COVID, or things are just financially tough right now because things have happened in your family or your life that has put you in financial distress, then you still absolutely can look after yourself. It's just about being smart and knowing where to invest your time, your effort, and your money in building your diet. And so I want to chat through that today. So I think at the very base level is we want to start with vegetable intake. So we know from good science, and I chatted about this in an earlier episode in season 1, that meeting your serves of vegetables every day is vital for good health. And that increasing from 1 serve of veggies to 5 serves decreases your risk of death and disease by 20%, of things like heart disease, some cancers, etc., which is huge. So even there, just forget about the chia seeds or the, do you know what got me annoyed the other day was some influencer had this breakfast on her Instagram feed, and it was porridge, and it looked beautiful, but it had like this caramel, healthy vegan caramel sauce thing on it, and then nuts and chia seeds and everything. And then it had like the edible flowers. Do you know how much edible flowers are? They're like something like $12 for this tiny little packet. Anyway, you do not need flowers on your breakfast to be healthy. Gross. Not gross. It's more annoying and frustrating. You know, if you want to have flowers on your breakfast, great, but you don't need them. You don't need flowers on your porridge. That's totally fine. So if we want to, let's get really back to basics with healthy eating on a budget. So Here is 6 steps for eating well on a budget, and then I'm going to highlight some cheaper, nutritious foods from a range of different food groups that you can include. So the first thing with managing a tight budget is meal planning. The key thing with meal planning is that you're intentional about what you're eating and you're thinking ahead in advance. Now, what that does is it means that you can minimize food waste, write a shopping list so you're only buying what you're needing. It also means that you can make ingredients go over a number of different meals. I remember signing up to a weight loss program that will remain unnamed when my son was little, and I wanted to lose about 6 kilos after I gave birth to him. And I was back in my all or nothing perfection mentality, and so I start this program and I'm like, I'm going to do this meal plan perfectly. And so every single meal, snack, everything, I'm going to do it to the letter exactly how it's spelled out, which actually meant a brand new recipe for every meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snack for 7 days. I went to the supermarket with the shopping list that they provided us with, and typically back then I would spend between $150 to $200 on groceries, which was just for my husband and I, and then we had 2 little toddlers. And this recipe's shopping list for the meal plan that I was following, it ended up costing me around about $450 for a week's worth of food. So my husband nearly shot me. Like, he was, what the hell? And I was like, oh, I'm sorry, babe, but I just needed to do this perfectly and it's going to be yummy and all this amazing food. And he was just like, he was pretty cross that I'd spent so much money, and rightly so. Like, we were on a tight budget and 1 income back then. And anyway, one of the things was I had to buy coriander, and it was $5 a bunch. You know the deal. Literally, the recipe was like, oh, and garnish. Just garnish with coriander. And then there was no coriander in the whole rest of the week, and it ended up being wasted and thrown out. So meal planning is about being intentional, thinking about how your meals can work together, utilizing leftovers, putting ingredients through a number of meals. You just have to be smart. So where you lack in finances, where you can just buy whatever you want, you have to make up for in smarts. Just be super smart about your meal planning. Spend that little bit of extra time and you will be able to eat super well without having to spend too much. The next thing that can help you is shopping online. Now, shopping online often does have slightly inflated prices compared to going into the supermarket, so it is a bit more expensive in that way. I once compared, so did a shopping list online and then went in and bought the exact same stuff from the supermarket, and it was about $15 difference. So, that makes a difference there. But the thing that I like about shopping online is that I can see how much it's going to cost before I check out. Whereas when I'm at the supermarkets, it's too late then, really. I'm like, oh, $450, crap. Whereas if it's online, I can be like, oh, that's a lot. And so then I can start taking out things and be like, oh, we don't really need that, etc. So I just like that it doesn't catch you by surprise if you shop online, and you can start to see how much this is going to cost. So if you've splurged on, let's say goat cheese, for example, which is $8 for the tiniest amount, then you can go, oh, okay, let's not have goat cheese. We can drop the basket by $8. Okay, so number 3 is eating seasonally. So particularly with fruits and veggies, eating things that are in season will mean that they just taste better and that they're cheaper because they're in more accessible. So that's a great way. But frozen fruit and veggies is also a really great way to save money, because the fact that they've been snapped frozen increases their shelf life. So because they can last a lot longer and be stored, it reduces their price. Number 4 is prioritizing food for main meals and minimizing your extra snack foods. So if you're putting your money into veggies and whole grain carbohydrate sources and legumes and, whole food protein sources, it will add up. Some things are more expensive when you're buying the less processed version. But if you're then minimizing the chips and the chocolate and the cakes and the muffins and the pastries and the snack foods, you actually will end up probably coming out better in the works, because all of those snack foods, they add up too. So just changing your food environment and not having those high energy foods as available will help you save money as well. Number 5 is to buy in bulk. So certainly buying in bulk, it reduces the price, particularly of things that you would use a lot of. Maybe it's like rice or oil that you do cooking in. I like to buy big olive oil because I save a bit of money because I use olive oil all the time, that kind of thing. There's a lot of places where you can go and buy in bulk. And then lastly is increase the prep that you do. So the best example of that is comparing like brown rice that you buy in a packet that you would boil yourself to then the instant rice cups. So one of those cups would probably be close to $1.50, $2 for literally 3/4 of a cup of cooked rice. Whereas for about $4, $5, you can buy half a kilo of raw rice, which is equivalent to nearly, I can't even think of the mass, but a lot of rice, right? So if you're prepared to do the prep yourself, so cook the rice, you will save a lot of money. Cook the rice and then you divide it into 3/4 portions for your lunches ahead. You'll save so much money than if you buy the instant things. So there's a couple of tips. I just to finish off want to highlight just some cheaper, nutritious, like minimally processed foods. So focus your efforts on those, build your meals out of those. And then, you know, if you've got a little bit left over in your budget, you can splurge on the more fancy things like salmon, for example, at $30 a kilo. Maybe just splurge on that occasionally. Lamb at $40 a kilo. You don't have to eat that all the time, but if you like it, you know, splurge on that once or twice a month or something like that, and then build the rest of your meals out of the cheaper options. So eggs, super cheap, $1 per 2 eggs. So that's $1 per protein serve, super cheap. Canned tuna is really cheap. Turkey mince, in fact, any kind of mince, chicken mince, beef mince, pork mince. Mince is a really cheap way to get a minimally processed protein source. And mince, yeah, it's been through the mincer, but it's got nothing added and nothing taken away. So it's still reasonably an intact whole food. Lentils and legumes, chickpeas, beans, fantastic. You know, you're looking at $1 a can, which is $1 really per 2 people, 2 serves. Great protein, fiber, minerals. You got to love your beans in the cans. Drain them and rinse them really well to get rid of the brine, which will get rid of around 70, 80% of the salt in them, which is great. Pasta, cheap as, but you can get now lovely wholemeal, high fiber pastas, etc. Brown rice, nice cheap options. Apples are $1 each, you know, and you go to the cafe for a snack and you get a coffee for $4.50. Buy an apple for $1, etc. Really cheap snack. Potato is 80 cents per 200 grams, which is around about 1 serve of carbohydrate in our program. Super cheap. Keep the skin on, bake it. It's a nutritious option. Pumpkin, again, super cheap. Mandarins, another cheap fruit, particularly when they're in season, but fruit when they're in season is often really cheap. Wheat Bix, rolled oats, really nice low-cost breakfast options. And then veggies, carrots, tomatoes, baby spinach, broccoli, nice cheap options, particularly if they're in season, and even cheaper if you buy them frozen. They can be fantastic options to use as your base for your meal plan, and then just throw some fun more expensive things on there as you want. Otherwise, look, being on a budget, you know, means that you're sort of having to pull on these other resources like meal planning and food storage and shopping skills. So if you need help developing these skills, my online program helps you learn them, teaches you meal planning, helps you learn and feel educated about carbohydrates and proteins and different nutrients, so you feel really confident in making food choices that are right for you. So check that out. I'll pop the link to that in the show notes if you feel like you need any extra help. Otherwise, happy budgeting, team. Stay savvy and smart and all those great things. And we'll see you in the next episode.